Hello, everyone. It's Mr. Nobody. Welcome to another episode of Making Nobody Happy. And the episode today is 10 Big Lies We Tell Our Kids. And this is something that's been on my mind for a long time. And I decided to put it in the form of a list of 10 because who doesn't love lists, especially on the internet? The internet loves lists. Obviously, I could have shortened or lengthened this list, all kinds of things, but everybody seems to love 10. So, number one, and this is when I say big lies we tell our kids, I mean, in general, what you tend to hear if you have kids, you've heard all these things a million times. They're in your TV shows, they're repeated by adults, they're said to the kids at school. These are just the popular things that everybody says and that kids hear. So, number one, self-expression is the greatest challenge, not self-control. It is easy to express yourself. It is the first thing everyone does by nature. Even when we're having a hard time expressing ourselves in a group, it's because of all the self-expression going on. And you are still expressing yourself, just not yourself as you would if you were alone in the world or if you were a 2-year-old and not really fully conscious. Encouraging everyone to act like 2-year-olds isn't an achievement. Self-expression as a value is a tautology. You are always expressing yourself, even when you're expressing things like fear and anxiety, deference, caution. That's you reacting to existing realities. Often our idea of self-expression is just coding for selfishness, lack of awareness, and short-term impulsivity, childishness, basically. That's the core idea and aim, maximizing unreflective, short-term impulsivity. Self-expression divorced from any longer-term or embedded or thoughtful or multifaceted or morally considered analysis and structure that takes the rest of reality and other humans and their claims and on us and their necessities into account. Now, it is easy to make that a virtue. It is the virtue of a lazy and immature society, one that hasn't really thought through the consequences of such an approach, but just wants it to be true for them. Learning self-control, learning to integrate all the levels of your life and bring your various conflicting impulses under a higher, more organized and integrated structure, that's hard. That's very hard. It takes maturity, being honest, giving the things their due, giving other people and the rest of the world and everything else that is out there their due, giving all the different facets within yourself their due. That is hard. That is a completely higher and harder and more complex version of honesty that requires more than just taking away all filters between yourself and your basic impulses. That is the cheapest form of honesty. So, number one, self-expression is the greatest challenge, the greatest thing that we must call our children to. And I am going to knock through these quickly. I'm not going to get into huge amounts of discussion. I'm just going to, usually I try to pull my punches and win you over a bit more. I'm not going to try and do this time. This is me just hitting these things and just saying, I don't agree with these things at all. And that if you spend enough time thinking through them, you will see that this is the problem with them, particularly the way that we use it. And this is what I was mean. There's often this big divide between what we say and what we think we're saying. And sometimes you have to actually pay attention to how we're using these phrases and the other things we say with them. So I'm not going to waste all my time building my case on this. I'm going to jump straight through to the conclusions, like I said, and tell you what I think about them. But they're all based on long, complex observation of how we actually use these terms and ideas, what we really seem to mean by them. Okay, so our first lie was self-expression is the great challenge, is the hard thing in life. Not self-control. Number two, lie we tell our kids. Tolerance means supporting what someone else does or believes, rather than strategically ignoring it. Tolerance does not mean I'm obligated to agree with you or support you or anything like that. It just means I'll tolerate you. We don't have to outright fight about whatever this thing is, as long as we give each other some space. Um, so, tolerance in a collectivist country means control and uniformity because we're all occupying one another's spaces and we have to move and live as a group. In an individualistic country, it basically means giving other people their space and letting good fences make good neighbors. Now, America, I'm not saying you couldn't design a more collectivist country, and they certainly exist, but America was designed as an individualistic country, one of greater freedom, one that provides space, not a collectivist country where we're all obligated to be the same by the demands of the social trends. Tolerance doesn't mean that I have to agree with you or endorse you or even like you or anything you think or do. If that was what it meant, they could have never put America together because the 13 colonies were in massive disagreement with each other. They did not agree with each other. They did not. They did. They did not see immediately how they could even be a unified whole. That was a problem that they had to solve because they were in so much disagreement and because they had such different ideas of how they should do things. But they designed this system that provided for freedom, and tolerance is a factor within it. But as I say, it is this tolerance of respect and distance. So, as I said, it doesn't mean that I have to agree with you. It doesn't mean I have to endorse you. It doesn't mean I have to even like you or anything that you think or do. And you don't have to endorse me. You don't have to agree with me. You don't even have to like me. You don't have to like what I'm doing. What it means is you respect my territory and I will respect yours within necessary agreed on limits, because of course there's always limits to any system like that. Um, one way to think about it is, what kind of animal do you think you're dealing with? Ants. Ants are this big eusocial collectivist society. They can do all sorts of things. But very much the way that it works, the way that they're able to inhabit that space with these enormous amounts of individuals and work like that is they are uniform. They are literally all like basically clones, you know. They're drones. They are controlled by the queen, by the expert at the top, and they are all practically identical. They're all sisters. Now, you look at the other end of animals, and you look at something like tigers. Tigers maintain really defined territories. They have really distinctive identities. Every one of them has this very unique territory, unique in particular. And they do not like other tigers crossing those borders of their territories. If you're a tiger and you cross into another tiger's territory, you are going to have a fight. Even if those tigers are related, like a mother tiger will fight her own daughter tiger if her daughter tiger encroaches into her territory. They actually have ways of avoiding that. Basically, if they're young enough, the daughter tiger can roll over and show their belly and basically do things that say, I'm not coming here as another tiger. I'm coming here as like still your cub. So can I just visit? And then I'm going to leave and respect your territory. And then that works. And then the female tigers have their own territories. Male tiger territories overlap with it. They're more independent. They're more solitary. Tigers are highly individualistic, like I said, because it's like, I want me to be in my territory and nobody else. And if anybody else comes into it, we are fighting, and I am ripping you to pieces. Now, are we tigers or ants? Well, we're not quite either. But if you had to look at what the crazy experiment of America was, it's that what if we could have a nation of tigers? What if there was a way to maximize our ability to be a nation of tigers? What could be unleashed? What could we allow to come into existence? I don't mean to some insane degree, but to the degree, to what degree is it possible to have a nation of tigers instead of a nation of ants where we're all just ruled by the queen? where instead we have our own territories and our own sub-territories, within it. I think we were designed to be a nation of tigers, not an ant. So because of that, we need tolerance, not acceptance. You have to fit your strategy to the kind of creature you're trying to have inside this environment. Now, if you think that tolerance means that I have to accept your ideas, then that is not tolerance. That is tyranny and control and social oppression and manipulation and enforced uniformity. Making everyone agree with you as a condition of society being satisfactory for you is holding freedom hostage, not supporting it. That is not tolerance. Now, I will say as a parenthetical that there are certain things that endanger the whole fabric of the society itself, and those fall outside of the realm of what can be tolerated and maintained as personal territory. Now, how we discover and decide on what those things are is a matter of great contention, including right now in our society, more than ever before, where once it maybe wasn't quite as much of a general disagreement. Now, there is no solution for that problem exactly, no easy solution. That basic agreement about what the fundamental limits are, that's the fundamental, these are the things that are like make up the fundamental basis of human existence and like peaceful, prosperous society, well-being, sanity, like the basic components of human flourishing and for a society to function. Now, if you have groups of people whose fundamental theories on what those things are that are the very basis for sanity conflict, well, they don't really even belong to the same civilization, and they probably shouldn't be part of the same state. And if you force them to be together, yeah, they're going to have massive conflicts. It's going to be really hard because the spirit that animates your most basic idea of what society is and what makes it work, they aren't compatible. And that kind of conflict can only be resolved by destruction, destroy the other side, or conversion, make them come over and force them to adopt this standard, or by just saying, well, we're going to go different ways. But as I say, tolerance isn't about creating a world where we don't have conflict. Tolerance is about creating a system of rules and boundaries that manage and minimize our conflict so that we can be tigers and not ants. Okay, so number 3 lie. Believing in yourself is the biggest thing. How many movies have you seen that are just believe in yourself, believe in yourself, believe in yourself, believe in yourself? They have almost nothing else to say to kids except believe in yourself, believe in yourself. They don't even have any like more complex message than that. It's literally like a 3-word message, and that's as deep as it runs. And it's funny because we've met people who really believe in themselves, and if you've met these people, they're often the most insufferable people in the world. What you mean by believing yourself is positive self-delusion. And it's not entirely clear that that can be taught, or that it should be taught if it can be taught, or that it's possible to gain it, except at the cost of important self-awareness and social awareness. So we're basically encouraging people to be ignorant and delusional children who are already kind of predisposed to be that way. And when you meet adults who really believe in themselves, they are often tough people to be around. Like those most annoying people at work who will never shut up, who think that their ideas are the smartest and the greatest and are always pushing themselves. Those people believe in themselves. Total Machiavellians believe in themselves. Like, the truth is, you have this innate psychological system. Things like serotonin systems, all these systems, they don't just exist independently, these sort of self-esteem systems. Like, they actually exist for a reason. It's actually this innate psychological system that's meant to be tracking something, not just producing the end feeling. If the only thing humans needed was just to feel good about themselves, then we would just have that system only have one function: to be turned on all the time. But it isn't. Instead, it's this whole complex conditional system. Why? Because it's actually tracking something. It's meant to be keeping track of, hey, you're doing the good things right now, and now you're getting good feedback, and now's the time to push ahead, and now a little bit of this, and now you need to question yourself more. We're getting some bad feedback. Maybe we need to reevaluate this. Life is this moving target. Like, crank everything up. It's like saying we all you only need an accelerator on a car, and you only need a forward gear. No, that is insufficient. That is an insufficient message, especially reduced to such a shallow form of it. That is completely insufficient and actively dangerous. I mean, trying to just tell people to believe in themselves, like I said, it's not entirely clear that it's even possible. But even if you could do it and just say, whatever the case, just believe in yourself. Forget the system. Forget whatever it is it's supposed to track. Forget anything. Just believe in yourself. Well, what are you really doing there? What kind of person are you actually producing? Well, you're really producing someone for whom the things that happen and the way you feel about them are fundamentally dissociated. That is not a recipe for stability. Gaming the output instead of learning the system and doing the work is not a recipe for creating balanced humans. It's a recipe for creating unstable, ineffective sociopaths. It's like injecting silicone muscles into someone instead of working out. You're creating the appearance of functionality without building the mechanisms that produce it. Okay, next one. What do we want? 4, 5? I'm kind of losing track. Okay, this one is, what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. Or to put it another way, suffering is harm. This is one that other people have pointed out. Jonathan Haidt talked about it in The Coddling of the American Mind, that it's one of those things like, all cultures know this throughout all time. It's part of the most established wisdom of humanity, is that suffering produces strength. Now, this is not universally, it can also cause damage, but it's basically the great untruth is that what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. As I said, that suffering is just harm. That's all, and that's all it is. Rather than what you suffer and endure and can navigate can make you stronger. That challenge produces strength rather than ease. Strength doesn't come from never having to lift your finger and never having to face any obstacles. Like, look at veal. Veal has the mushy quality that it has because those cows never are even allowed to do anything. So, they did not come out into powerful powerhouses, big meaty powerhouses, by doing nothing. Strength doesn't come from never needing to learn anything, never needing to learn to maintain your cool in the face of complexity and uncertainty. Like, great men and great women are not the product of excessive coddling and ease, but are rather the product of surviving and overcoming challenge. Okay, that should be an obvious one. And yet, it is contradicted constantly in the approach people take, especially with young. Okay, next one. Next lie is, you can define your own truth or beauty or goodness. This is basically just relativism. People say it all the time, and it's like, that's a super Nietzschean idea, which at least he had more of a smart version of. Is it possible to create our own values? Doesn't actually seem to have worked out. Or everything can just be self-defined relatives. It's not really the philosophical story behind it isn't great. It all just collapses into existentialism, and then eventually revives itself into this sort of postmodernist zombie of pretending not to have died. Sorry if I'm getting kind of complex on this one, but This idea that you personally can define your own truth or beauty or goodness. You even see this with adults. My wife was reading a mystery novel where they had someone taking an oath in court where they said, "Tell your truth." And it's like, what kind of oath is that to ask anyone to take in court? Like, what is the point of even being there? Every person's going to tell their own truth. The criminal's going to tell their own truth. Like, this undermines the entire concept. No court would ever say that, because if they ever did say that, or if a policeman interviewing someone said that, "Tell your truth," like, the whole thing's a waste of time. Like, the whole thing should just be shut down. It's pointless. Anyway, so this, in my opinion, is a very common lie. It's one of the big underlying ones. There's a million things that could be said about it, but I'm going to try and keep it short. And one of the things is that we tell it to kids because we think we're being nice. That's a lot of these things. A lot of these what we would call nice lies. We think we're being nice by telling these lies. We don't really think the truth, including difficult truth that might demand something of us, or that might be unpleasant, or might require something of us, growth of us. We feel like, ooh, it's mean of me to actually tell a kid something like that, so I won't. Instead, I'll tell them this nice lie. It'll make them feel better, while at the same time actually dislocating them from reality, making the world become this crazy, incomprehensible place that they no longer understand how to navigate, and ultimately producing tons of suffering and failure for them. That's why it is not actually nice. But we tell these lies because they're nicer for us. It's nicer for us to tell these lies. It is much nicer and easier to say these lies than to have to work through the truths, especially with children. Because that takes a lot of time and discipline and explaining and keeping things up. Anyway, and education, all sorts. It demands so much. It would demand so much of us. Lies can be lazy and easy and really take the burden off of us parents. So, let me just tackle this one. As I said, the lie is that you can define your own truth or beauty or goodness. It is not doing a favor to anyone to tell them this. And relativism is not the kindest worldview. You might say, "Oh, well, I'm a relativist. I think everything is equally true." No, that's completely undermining the entire idea of the word true. What you really did was flush the word truth down the toilet and just say, what you're really saying is you're all wrong. That's what relativism is really doing. It's actually saying everyone is equally wrong, and none of your claims have any truth in the classical sense of the word, what people actually mean by it, of like tracking some underlying reality. None of you are correct. The only thing and the only person that is correct is me and my universal judgment about all of these things. And so they're all just toys I can play with. Like, they don't really matter. They don't really mean anything. I could jump between them. I can give you space to have those beliefs. Why? Because they genuinely don't matter. Like, they have no relevance outside of you. They track nothing except the inside of your head. And so I am fully within my rights to just completely ignore them and dismiss them. Now, you might think that's nice by reducing people's statements and beliefs and things of enormous importance to just nothing, to mere toys, but I think that's a terrible thing to do. Relativism is the negation of everything except itself. And so it's actually the least tolerant and the least diverse stance, because it's a world that contains nothing. It doesn't contain the most things, it contains the fewest things. Beauty, truth, or goodness that is truly only yours is insufficient for the needs of the human heart and for the needs of human society. And you are starving and impoverishing and wrecking people by pushing that onto them. It will break your heart. It will frustrate you and others as you actually have to live your life and don't understand why things aren't working the way you think they should work. It will fragment the soul of society into 1,000 whirling shards. It is an absolutely terrible thing to do. It is the worst possible thing that you can do to people. You're destroying the fundamental basis of their sanity and the meaningfulness of everything they do and think. Okay, next lie. Follow your heart. Sure hear that a lot. This is kind of related to some earlier ones that we talked about. But what does this even mean? Follow your emotions? That what it means? Follow your impulses, your inclinations? Don't follow your higher thinking? I mean, what does it mean? Follow your heart. What is your higher thinking for then? What are these things that are supposedly getting in the way? Why do they exist? What is your ability to talk with other people and have them give you input and converse with them, to question and think over stuff? Why does that even exist? Why do you have anything other than your heart? Why should any of that other stuff exist if it tracks nothing and has no purpose? If the only thing you need is your feelings or your impulses, I mean, what is a feeling? What even is this thing, this heart? Right? And I'm saying people use it like they seem to think, well, I mean, your feelings, maybe, I don't know, impulses, as I said. I mean, are we saying people should just be purely instinctive, like an animal? That you don't need your higher reasoning. You should just purely always be acting and just following whatever your instinctive responses are. Some people really are fantastic at that. They're great at being themselves without any interference or self-doubt or higher reasoning or discussion with others or questioning or anything. And the truth is, most people do not like people like that, and those people are often not very good to other people. Maybe there's a tiny, tiny amount of people whose following their heart means doing all sorts of wonderful things for everybody all the time. But no, not most humans. Have you met people? Most people know. We might want to believe that about ourselves, but I mean, you've got to be pretty self-deceived to even think that about yourself. I mean, how well do you really understand even your own heart that you're willing to just say, well, follow that, unqualified? How well do you know yourself and everything that you contain or could contain if you were just being yourself? I mean, are you really familiar with what most other people's instincts are? And a lot of not great ones, or your own. Maybe being yourself doesn't mean following your instincts. Maybe it means like follow your feelings. If that is anything different, it's hard to say if that is even a different thing. And that just puts you into the same problem. What is a feeling? How do we arbitrate between them? How do we negotiate between them? Within ourselves as much as with other people. I mean, feelings, I would maybe say feelings are like a heuristic reaction. It's a formulaic response, so we can quickly respond to something that we haven't had time to closely examine. Like like I said, it's like a formula that we've and it can act in a split second. But it's not that complex, and it's often very limited. It's heuristics. If you don't know what that is, maybe try to take some time to look it up. But it's like a machine that you've built to give you quick and easy reactions to things. So, so we're saying those things should be in charge. These quick, hot takes, basically, hot takes on things. Well, the problem is you have a lot of feelings, for one thing. So which one of your feelings are you going to follow? And for how long? All the time? Because they change. You might have a bunch of different ones within you that all disagree. Some are saying go this way. Some are saying go this way. Some are saying push forward. Some are saying pull back. Some are saying let's go do things. Some are saying let's sit here. They all want to be overwhelming. That's part of how feelings are because they're simplistic. And they also change over time. So which feeling and at what point are you saying follow that? I mean, maybe then to be yourself is to favor a response from some singular voice within your consciousness, defending its individual demands and territory against the rest. I'm going to take this feeling and make it the god over all the other beasts within me. Well, what decides within you that one should be? Is the thing that decides another feeling? It's just it's a nightmare of regression. It's a shallow, silly thing to say. Other people have attacked that idea a lot more detail, but it is very shallow. It is very non-functional. Okay, getting near the end here. I think we're at number 9, maybe. Okay, here's another lie we tell our kids. Rights exist and support themselves independently of the creative, generative power of fulfilled responsibilities. Now, this is, we do talk about rights a lot. We have stopped talking about responsibilities, really. I'm not unique in pointing this out. But what I would say, my particular spin on it, I do want to share. Because it's not just that responsibilities are important and we need to weigh them against rights. I would say rights only exist because of responsibilities. Like, they only exist and support themselves because of the existence of responsibilities. And without them, they're completely meaningless and useless and maybe even counterproductive. So, in the strictest sense, in some sort of ontological sense, like, rights don't exist at all. They're purely negative in nature. Rights are a carving out of an empty space that it is your obligation to fill with the action of responsibility. Like, for me, that is what a right actually is. It is this carving out of territory, of empty space. Why? For what? How? It is an empty space to be filled with the action of assumed responsibility. But that space only exists as long as those responsibilities are discharged in a way that dilates the human space, that creates a place for them and a justification for them. So you have rights so you can pursue responsibilities, so that void can be filled with something. The responsibilities that you take on create a space of justified ownership and therefore a right. And I think that is actually the underlying understanding, I think, in the Constitution, just the way that it's framing it. The responsibilities that they think belong to all humans, that's our personal work. We have this responsibility to do these things, and as individuals, not for the state to do them for us or decide them for us, but for us individually, we're going to take on these responsibilities of life, liberty, and happiness. We're going to take on those. Those are actually responsibilities to try and make life work. We're going to take them on for ourselves. We're going to make these decisions and do this work. Well, because we have done that, because we have taken on that responsibility, we now have this justified ownership over the space where we're doing this work. Well, that pushes back the demands of the rest of the world, and what it creates, that sphere of ownership, it creates that negative space around us. It generates the right. It generates the right to that work. Anyway, that's where rights come from. The idea of rights just existing on their own is senseless talk. You can only talk about rights if you're also talking about responsibilities. Rights are generated by responsibilities and for them. All right, so here's the last one. Again, every one of these is something that, like, we tell them because they're pleasant lies. Every single one of these. They're easier to say. They're simpler. They're less costly. They're less work. They're less explanation. They're less education. They're less labor. They're less character development. They're less growth. They're short-term, easy things to say to just make people happy without having to actually help them to be happy and be productive of happiness. Because the truth is, knowing the truth makes you more able to produce happiness rather than just trying to produce the phenomenon of psychological happiness through pleasant delusion. Anyway, here's my final one. My final lie we tell kids: you can do anything. You can be anything you want to be. No, you can't. You are finite and particular, and so is the world around you. You have a nature. Humanity has a nature, and the world has a nature. There is structure, there is particularity, there are limits, and it is worth knowing what they are. And you could be wrong about what they are. You might overestimate them, actually. You might misidentify what the structure is or what the limits are, but that just means that your data collection about yourself and about the world and your theory about yourself and the world need work. That's fine. We want knowledge, we want truth, we want honesty. But it's going to be honesty about something that is actually particular and finite. Maybe you do need to expand it because it's too small, but it's not infinitely expandable. It's not unbounded. It is not without a particular character. You only have so much time. You only have so much energy. You only have so much talent. You may only have so many opportunities. You only have this body, this mind, these talents, these people, this time, this place. Learning to understand and accept these things is part of the burden of being human, because we're aware of them in ways that other organisms can't be. They sort of have to accept them without understanding they're being forced to accept them. And if they fail, they just suffer or die, generally. It's pretty straightforward to them. They can't be conscious of it in the same way we can. And then time is a problem. Time marches on. Time forces us to take a particular path and coalesce a particular role and particular story in the drama of life. Wishing to remain pluripotent forever, if you don't know what pluripotent means, it's what like a stem cell is. A stem cell can become anything. It is pluripotent. It could be anything, could go any direction. So wishing to remain pluripotent forever is really a wish not to be, to not mature, to not take a particular form, and that is anti-life. Life's infinite potential is the infinity of empty space that has yet to be filled, of nothingness, until it becomes some particular thing. Now, a stem cell is amazing because it could become any cell. Not absolutely any cell, a cell of any kind of qualities, but any of the particular cells of its particular species. And its amazingness is nothing in itself because it can't actually do anything. Its amazingness is entirely dependent on its ability to stop being a stem cell and become something. If it can't do that, it's nothing. It's part of nothing. It does nothing. Now, your inner potential is vast. You do not really know what its limits are. But as far as a character goes, you have a particular one. And learning to understand it and love it and govern it and care for it and develop it is as much an essential part of the burden and adventure of human life as is learning to live in the particular time that you were born, and to whom and where. This is the real adventure of life, is actually these particularities, actually writing something on the page, actually having that particular story. You have particular parents, and that limits you, but they're uniquely yours. There's a belonging that generates, a franchise, an identity that is generated by that confinement. And there's a power and a responsibility too. There's actually so much that comes out of this becoming that for some reason we seem to want to reject, and we seem to want to encourage children to reject. And it is this way just with your time on Earth, your place, your character, your embodiment. You didn't get to choose those. You didn't create them. And you will, perhaps, trap some future person in the time and body and place that you help mold, a child of your own, for their time, in their place, with their being. And you can help with that. You can help them learn to shoulder that, learn to shoulder their place, their particularity, their time, their bit of this story, so that one day they can hand that on too. We're always only ever stewards of the time that we inhabit, and we may wish that it was otherwise. We may abdicate our inheritance, our stewardship, but it doesn't vanish. It just falls to others, and it leaves us behind, frozen in our moment. We may wish that this moment, these parents, this character, this place, this being were not ours to carry. And we all wish that sometimes. But such things are not for us to decide. All we have to do is to decide what to do with what is given to us. All right, well, that's all for today. We'll see you next time.